reasons why, but it's obvious that they did.
Okay, we're coming up on a break. We are joined by Dr. Eugene Schroeder. We'll be back here on the Real News with Farron and Brian in a mere moment. With Farron and Brian. Again, we are joined with Dr. Schroeder, author of the book Constitution, Fact or Fiction, and this interview will be archived at libertynewsradio.com, and also we are filming the interview, so we will post it on our website, and you can go to the link on the YouTube channel. It'll take Jim probably till tomorrow to get it done, but therealnewsradio.com, so you can send this information to anyone that you want to. So we want to get this information out. The book is no longer in print, and we want everyone to come to grips with the fact that these facts are true. Dr. Schroeder has done us a great service looking into this information, and it is, in my opinion, not even up for debate. He has made the case, and it is proof the Constitution is in suspension, and it's been so since March 9th, 1933.
Hello, Dr. Schroeder. This is Brian. Good morning, sir.
Yes, Brian. Good morning to you, too.
Again, as Farron said earlier, it's a true honor to have you on here with us this morning. We consider you a true patriot for everything you've done. You could have easily sat home or done something else with your time, but you didn't. You took this out to the people. And that's the perspective I want to get from you, sir. Farron and I are members of the North Carolina activist group We Are Change, and we're always going out, passing out DVDs, information, and it can be quite frustrating, as I'm sure you can imagine, sir, just the lack of response, respect from the public to pass this information out. So I'd like to get some of your perspective on that, sir.
Two things, I think. One of the things is that the issues we're discussing here are rather complex. It's not just a simple little emotional thing that we can talk about does Americans have the right to bear arms or something of that nature. That this is quite a bit more complex of an issue, and it takes a more thorough understanding, I think, of the Constitution and constitutional law of history and those types of things to comprehend what we're even saying here. Many people don't have those levels of understanding. This leads to the next point, is that so what we really need is a public debate, a public discussion of these issues. But yet, when we try to have that, then it seems like the people who could cause that to happen, the major media, is not interested. I think Farron mentioned very early in the program today that he had asked some public officials and maybe even some news media to come onto this program during his series and discuss these matters. And yet they've declined to do that. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, sir. That is correct, and we have publicized that here. We've kept it no secret. And on that point, which I think is a great point Brian is making, Barack Obama is a constitutional lawyer, so it would be ridiculous to believe that he is not aware of these facts we're discussing here today, would it not?
It's obvious that he understands these facts. He's mentioned it before that he can do all these things under his executive powers. He knows that. Congress knows it as well. Many do.
Dr. Schroeder, have you ever suffered any kind of backlash directly from all of your activist activities?
Nothing really very important or very major. I've had discussions with some of the military people from West Point that said I should take all that material off the internet, that it was damaging to the Constitution and to the military. Things like that, and some discussions, but nothing very major.
And also, back to the Constitution, one of the points that you make, because a lot of people, their biggest question is, where does the Constitution give them the power? Not only the Article 1, Section 9, public safety may require it, but also the Fifth Amendment, the public danger part of the Fifth Amendment is also, if I'm correct, one of the things that they point to that gives them the right to suspend the Constitution.
Yes, that's correct. The Fifth Amendment, the right to the indictment, it says that person shall be entitled to an indictment except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in the times of service or public danger. And so we see, even the mentions within the Constitution that our framers were well aware of these emergency and war powers. In fact, if we go back to the first petition that was signed by our forefathers and sent to the King of England prior to the Declaration of Independence, there we see again that they were well aware of the war powers. In fact, that petition began with the words that since the close of the last war, the British Parliament claiming the power of right to bind the people of America by statute in all cases whatsoever. And that was strictly against the English freemen and the Constitution that had grown up statutory for several hundreds of years. And they didn't argue that during the war that the British government had that kind of power, but they said since the war was over, they've continued using the war powers to control us. And that led to the Revolutionary War in this country. That led to the formation of our country. So it's not as though this issue is a new issue that just came up recently under our Constitution. It, in fact, was the cause of our Constitution.
Jim Traficant, this is one of the things there's two things that got me started on this. One, in the Obama deception, Wayne Paul mentioned this, and then I had a copy of what Jim Traficant had said on the House floor back in, I believe it was 93, 94, and he ended up, they put him in prison, but he had stated that the federal government of the United States of America had been bankrupt since 1933, and the Secretary of the Treasury just acted as the receivership for the Federal Reserve banking system. Do you think that all of that goes hand in hand with it being 1933 with what FDR did and the Emergency Banking Act and the suspension of the Constitution through the Farm Act bill, that the United States of America has been bankrupt since 1933, and that really the Federal Reserve banking system is who is in the real power lies here in America?
Constitutionally, we're bankrupt. Financially, with constitutional money, we're bankrupt. I mean, that's rather obvious. Have we ever filed a formal bankruptcy? No. I'm sure we haven't. I've never seen it in all my researches looking at all these things. I've never seen a formal declaration of a bankruptcy. But nonetheless, the government seized the gold, and of course that didn't bankrupt the government. It bankrupted the people, but the government then had all the powers of that money. And by and large, they have a lot of control over the Federal Reserve. They tend to control a lot of the things that the Federal Reserve does. So consequently, I think it done a lot to strengthen the government. I think that's rather obvious that not only to get itself strengthened financially because it could issue all the money it wanted, but it also began to expand in all these alphabet agencies to where today we have the federal government involved in every aspect of our daily lives. So the American people, I think, went a long ways towards bankruptcy, but the government not.
And also, that's a point that I had slipped my mind. Through this legislation, this is where the government declared the authority to license and issue permits and to, like you just said, to dictate so many aspects of our life. It all goes back to FDR in 1933, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. In fact, a few years later, they called these the alphabet agencies. That there was executive agencies that was created to cover almost everything that the American people do. Today, those agencies are mostly headed up by the czars, I guess, that Obama has appointed now. They changed it a little bit, but nonetheless, it's still the same thing.
How much time did you spend, Dr. Schroeder, through the 90s? I know you and Rodney Miller and several others were going around doing speaking engagements. How much time did you spend in years on this, sir?
I began to study in earnest about 1976 or 7, and studied through the 80s up to the 90s when I finally understood what had happened. I'm not very fast. It took me quite a while to get all this figured out.
Well, it had to seem overwhelming just to go through the information and then have to decipher it all and put it into context. We are going to have here in our studio here in